Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Massive thanks to the authors, Roxi2Star and ThatOneZed for allowing me to adapt their awesome story. Follow the link in the description to check out more of their works. Today we will be listening to the 16th part of What If Deku Had Both One for All and All for One. If you enjoy, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing down below, and don't forget to hit that bell icon so you get notified when videos go live. Now, without further ado, let's get into the video. Chapter 32, Hot Springs. Chapter by Roxi2Star. Night 1. The hot shower water felt wonderful. Izuku couldn't help but groan as he let the warm water roll over his body, slowly peeling away the layers of mud and grime he'd gathered in the forest that day. He sat on the stool in the onsen, holding the shower hose over his hair and letting the short green mop soak up the water. "Want me to wash your back?" Shoto stood behind him, hands crossed over his chest. He still had his towel wrapped around his waist, his long hair just barely touching his shoulders. He offered Izuku a handsome smile. Oh. He glanced around. All the guys were deep in their own showers, a few of them already heading towards the hot spring. "Sure. I can wash yours too." "Thank you," he said, and Izuku watched as his boyfriend removed his towel, hanging it up. He averted his gaze, blushing deeply. "Izuku, it's not like you haven't seen it before," he whispered. "But Xiao-chan. People are around," he whispered right back. Shoto poured soap into his hands, rubbing them together until they built up lather. "No one is looking at us," he said as he began to rub Izuku's back gently. "You have a nasty bruise back here. Did one of those beasts get you?" He nodded. "I think so. I got kicked into a tree, remember? You burnt that one to a crisp." Shoto's hands felt good. Just the skin-to-skin contact was lovely. Even more so when his right hand cooled down the bruise on his back. "Ooh." He sighed happily, leaning into his touch. He helped him wash off, before getting some shampoo for his hair. Shoto's long fingers tangled themselves into Izuku's curls, scrubbing his head gently. It felt so good. Izuku let his eyes roll back into his head with a small groan. "See now, Bun, if you keep making noises like that, people will look at us," he teased, rubbing soothing circles on his temples. "See, can't he help it?" he sighed, his eyes screwing shut. "Your hands feel good." Shoto chuckled, taking the shower head from him. "Still, gotta keep quiet," he said, and slowly rinsed the soap from Izuku's hair and skin. The warm water rushing over his body felt so good. He shuddered. "There. All clean. So you promised you'd clean me off too, right?" Izuku blushed. He had promised that, hadn't he? He stood and nodded at the stool. "Here." They switched, and Izuku took the shower head and began to rinse him off. Shoto hadn't gotten nearly as dirty as Izuku had, grime only covered where his skin had been showing. Then again, he hadn't been launching himself through massive beasts made of mud like Izuku had been all day. He grabbed the soap and gently washed Shoto's back. He slowed down, appreciating the smoothness of Shoto's skin. He surprisingly didn't have many scars. Not like Izuku's nightmare body. No, it seemed the only blemish on Shoto's skin was the single burn around his eye. "Your skin is so perfect," he said softly, before pressing a kiss to his shoulder. Shoto's breath hitched. He took a deep breath. "Thank you," he said softly. Once Shoto's body was clean, Izuku grabbed the same shampoo and lathered up his hair. It was so soft. The long strands slid through his fingers. "Do you like having your hair longer?" he hummed. "I do," Shoto said, leaning back into him. "I think it looks nice. Plus I can get it out of my face easier if I'm training." "I know you like it," Izuku chuckled and nodded, feeling the strands in his face. "And my dad hates it. Keeps telling me to get a haircut." Izuku tilted Shoto's head back to look in his face. "I'm glad," he said, and started to rinse the shampoo out of his hair. He paused and pressed a quick kiss to his forehead. "My poor salad," Shinso teased as he passed them. "Quit making out. We don't have much time before bed." And Izuku said, "We're getting up at 5 a.m. tomorrow." They both groaned at that but finished cleaning off, wrapping their towels around themselves and joining the rest of the boys outside. Izuku slipped off his towel first before sinking into the hot spring. "Oh, that's nice," he said happily. His aching muscles relaxed almost at once. He found a smooth rock to sit on, Shoto quickly sitting next to him. He leaned into his boyfriend's side as he watched around the spring. Ojiro was sitting on a rock having a quiet conversation with Zero, his tail flicking in and out of the spring water. Shinsu sat near Ida, who was talking animatedly about something. He watched Kaminari sneak up on Shinsu from behind and gave him a splash, soaking his puff of hair until it was flat against his face. Oi! He laughed as he splashed back. Kaminari-kun, Shinsu-kun, this is not proper onsen behavior. Ida cried. Ah, lay off Prez, Kaminari said, throwing an arm around Shinsu. We're just messing around. Since when have you been this built? Were you this buff when you joined the class? He asked, his other hand moving to grab Shinsu's pec. Holy shit, dude. What's your workout routine? Shinsu rolled his eyes, knocking Kaminari off. It could use some work, honestly, he said. Mito still kicks my ass every time we spar. Well dude, Kaminari said, you can't compare yourself to Midoriya-kun. That's like trying to compare grades with Yaomomo or Ida-kun. Or comparing flirting skills with me, he winked. Some people are just built differently. Todoroki kicks my ass too. Oh yeah, because Todoroki-kun is also built different, Kaminari said. Look at them. Literal power couple over there. They could destroy us all if they set their minds to it. Only reason they haven't is because of Midoriya-kun's strong moral compass and the fact that Todoroki-kun is a simp. Kaken growled, pulling away from his very in-depth conversation with Kirishima-oi. I could take those assholes with both my hands tied behind my back. Bunny, what's a simp? Kaken, our hand-to-hand is evenly matched and we haven't had our big blowout brawl yet, Izuku said, tilting his head innocently. And Shouto, a simp is just someone who really likes someone else but to a pathetic degree? If that makes sense. Shouto seemed to nod in understanding. Yeah, that sounds like me. I'm a simp. Most of the boys started laughing. Cyril laughed so hard he fell off his rock into the spring water, making Ojiro pull him out. So are you, he said, nudging Izuku. For all might. More laughter. Shinsu nearly choked on his own spit. Hey. Izuku sputtered. Simping implies a sexual attraction. Oh, Shouto hummed. You can't simp All Might then. He's your stepfather. Kaminari was crying laughing. That doesn't stop people in porn. He grabbed at himself. All Might step daddy, I'm stuck in the dryer. More of the boys started laughing even harder. Izuku's entire face burned. He leaned close to Shouto. It's not funny. Shouto frowned at that and sent a small blast of ice right at Kaminari. He jolted out of the water into Shinsu's lap. Dude. He cried. Fine, sorry Mito. I take it back. A protective arm pulled Izuku in closer. No one makes fun of Izuku but me, he said seriously, before pausing. And sometimes Shinsu, but only if it's really funny. He pressed a protective kiss on his head. Izuku rolled his eyes but chose to ignore the jeers and cooing of his classmates, instead letting his eyes slip closed as he leaned further into Shouto's comfort. After that, the conversations mostly became white noise. Izuku focused on the sound of the water running, and Shouto's voice as he had a quiet conversation with Ida. Izuku wasn't exactly paying attention to his words, just the soft rumble of his voice in his chest. It was so soothing. He could feel himself drifting. Shouto gently shook him awake. Izuku sat up, rubbing his eyes, looking around. They were the last two in the spring. Where is everyone? Left, he stood as he spoke, taking both of Izuku's hands and slowly leading him out of the spring. Come on, let's rinse off and get to bed. He helped him out and grabbed their towels, wrapping Izuku's around his waist first. As he worked, Izuku's sleep-heavy eyes wandered. He bit into his lip. How long has it been since everyone left? Not long. He put his own towel on and led him back inside. But I think most of the people are gone, and true to his word, when Izuku followed him back inside, the shower room was empty aside from Tokoyami, who was just gathering up the last of his things. He gave them a small wave before exiting and leaving them alone. Shouto sat Izuku down on a stool much like earlier after removing his towel. He grabbed the shower head, turning it on until the water was warm. Izuku grabbed his wrist, and met Shouto's eyes. Could we? He flushed deeply. Wanna do something else? He asked sweetly before bed, Tiger. He didn't really pay attention, simply letting Shouto clean them off. He towel-dried Izuku and helped him into his PJs, and held his hand as they left the bathroom. As they were leaving, they nearly trampled over Kota. "There you are." Kota snarled, "Your teacher is looking for you." Izuku blinked. "Oh. Thank you, Kota-kun," he said. "That was sweet of you to come check on us. I don't care about you. Just doing what I'm told." He turned away, stomping off muttering, "Stupid hero students." He watched him go, his brow furrowing in worry. Kota didn't like heroes? Why? Usually, people who didn't like heroes had a reason. What was Kota's deal? A file appeared in his brain. What was Kota's deal? He was certainly going to find out. A side project for this week. "Izuku," Shoto said quietly as they walked. "I can practically hear your thoughts. Leave him alone. Kota isn't your responsibility. We're going to be exhausted this week, the last thing you need is to worry about someone else. You know that's not going to stop me, right?" he asked. Shoto pushed his futon right against Izuku's, ignoring the looks from his classmates. He liked sleeping next to his boyfriend, and no one else was going to ruin this for him. If they wanted to be gross and cuddle in their sleep, that was their business. He laid himself on his futon with Izuku laying on the one on his right. They weren't cuddling just yet. They had some decency. "Man, no fair Midoriya," Zero sighed. "You're gonna hog Todoroki's air conditioning all to yourself." He was laying out his own futon not far from them. "Damn right," Izuku said, grabbing Shoto's right arm. "I put in all the work to make him friendly and happy, so I get the spoils." He smiled up at Shoto and pressed a kiss to his cheek. Maybe they didn't have decency. Ah well. Shoto would never say no to affection from his boyfriend. Actually, he was pretty sure he'd never be able to say no to anything Izuku asked him. Man. He was a simp. Izuku laid back, curling into his pillow and still holding Shoto's hand. Cute. He smiled at his boyfriend. "If you guys want, I can make some ice in the center of the room if we find a basin to collect the water." "Oh." Kirishima cried. "Tomorrow let's have Yaomomo make one for us, and then Todoroki can get us some good AC." Shoto laid back next to Izuku. He seemed to already be out cold. He smiled softly at him, waiting for the inevitable cuddles that were about to be forced upon him. "Just let me know." Shinsu took the futon on the other side of Izuku. "Damn, he's already out? That fast?" "When he's very tired he tends to just pass out," Shoto explained. "Whenever I sleep over he'll do this." "How often are you two sleeping together?" Kaminari asked, sliding into the spot next to Shinsu. "Seems pretty often." He wiggled his eyebrows before grabbing his pillow and jumping face first into the futon. "Do you share a bed?" "I'm there most Saturdays," Shoto explained. "No, he has a guest futon I sleep on. His father doesn't think it's appropriate for us to share a bed in a room alone." He sighed. He was pretty upset the one time it happened. "I really like Midoriya-san and wish him to like me as well, so it's doubtful we'll be sharing a bed after this anytime soon." Shinsu nodded, laying back. "Yamito mentioned that his dad yelled at him about it," he said. "It was a complete accident," Shoto said. "We were tired and it just happened." "Ahoy. I bet you were after all of that," Shinsu teased quietly. "Tiger." Shoto sent a small blast of ice toward Shinsu in retaliation, watching his hair freeze. "Joke's on you, that feels great." He stuck out his tongue. Shoto, deciding to be equally as petty, copied Shinsu and stuck his tongue back out in return, earning a chuckle from him. Kaminari, Zero, and Kirishima all perked up. "Tiger?" Kaminari asked with a grin. "He calls you Tiger?" Shoto's face burned bright and hot. "That's so funny, dude. I mean, it's also super cute, but OMG. Tiger Roki. Will you all shut the fuck up? I'm trying to sleep." Bakugo yelled from his futon, farthest away. He was sitting up, his eye mask pushed up onto his forehead. "We have to be up at the butt crack of the fucking dawn, so will you stupid fucks leave Deku and Icy Hot alone and go to bed?" He promptly put his mask back on and fell back into his futon. Shoto opened his mouth to warn them off one last time, but before he could, a strong pair of arms wrapped around his neck, and equally strong thighs grabbed his hips and legs, dragging him completely into Izuku's futon. Izuku clung to his side, his limbs entangled around him like an octopus with no intention of letting go. Kaminari, Zero, Shinsu, and Kirishima all laughed again. Shoto only smiled, wrapping his arm under Izuku and pulling him closer. Let them laugh. He was the one who got to cuddle the cutest boy in the universe. God, Xiaodo loved him. He loved his soft hair, big eyes, freckles, yet Xiaodo loved him. Loved. Day 2. Izuku woke up that morning all on his own. Blinking the sleep from his eyes, he found himself curled around Xiaodo with a death grip on his boyfriend. He sighed and slowly unfurled from him without disturbing his rest. He crawled out of bed and found his phone along the wall plugged in with the others. 4:36. Not enough time to go back to bed. Ah well, may as well just get ready for the day. He grabbed his gym clothes from the bag and made a quick change. Ugh, Deku, shut up. I wasn't even talking, Kikin. Izuku rolled his eyes. You were changing too loudly, he snapped back. He tugged his workout pants on. Most sincere apologies, oh great dynamite, he said. Anyway, you may as well get up. Izuku will be here to shake everyone awake in like 20 minutes. Kikin grumbled, but he did sit up and tossed his sleep mask down. I hate you, he said simply. Izuku waited for him to get changed as well. I'm starving. I'm sure they'll have some rice or something for us, he said. Come on, before the rest wake up. Not gonna wait for your precious boyfriend. Xiaodo's not a morning person. I'll let him have his extra 20 minutes, he said, throwing his hands behind his head. Besides, we're not attached at the hip all the time. Maybe I wanted to spend this morning with my bestest friend, Kikin shoved his shoulder as they left the boys' room of 1A. They walked in silence to the mess hall where the wild pussy cats were preparing breakfast for them. It looked like a lot of fruits and other healthy options. Ah. Good morning. Aren't you two kitties up early? Pixie Bob asked. Trying to impress a lady. Fuck no. Kikin. Izuku scolded. Sorry about him. We just happened to wake up, so we figured we might as well get dressed and get a head start. Mandalay smiled. Good for you two. Help yourselves. Koda was just grabbing the last few things before we were gonna wake up your classmates. As she said that, Koda arrived carrying another crate of fruit. He spotted Kikin and Izuku. He dropped the box next to the table, huffed, and stormed off. What's his problem? Kikin asked. I admire a bratty kid, but like damn, what the fuck did we do? Izuku sighed. He really doesn't like heroes, does he? Mandalay hummed softly. Koda's parents were heroes, she said. It was a few years ago, but they were the hero duo Water Hose. Both Izuku and Kikin froze. They remembered that incident. They had a whole talk about it one day in the bowling alley arcade. That's where they'd been when the news had broken out. A young couple killed in the line of action by a rogue villain. The one who'd lost an eye in their battle. He was still at large 2 years later. Oh no, Izuku said softly. No wonder. Poor Koda-kun. Maybe Izuku could talk to him. Maybe he could. Deku, Kikin warned quietly. Don't. I know what you want to do, but that's a grieving child, he whispered. I know you want to help, but the last thing he needs is some patronizing speech from a hero student. I can't just do nothing, Izuku hissed back. I know, Kikin sighed, I'm starved. I want a grapefruit. Get me a grapefruit. You have hands. Izuku called as he went to the table. He grabbed him a grapefruit. Earlier, night 1. Dabby, that was the name he was using now. Dabby stood on the cliff, eyes scanning the valley as he crouched near the edge. He felt like he was on fire already. Excitement burned in his veins. Soon, they would be able to have some fun. Though he wasn't sure how he felt about the people he'd been assigned to work with. To tell you the truth, Dabby wasn't entirely sure about the whole league to begin with, but they were the fastest way to his goals, so what did he care, really? I'm itching to go, the big one in the mask said. Muscular or something? Dabby found him intolerable. It's too soon, the one in the gas mask reminded him. His name was Mustard, Dabby was pretty sure. Some punk little kid with a handy quirk and a gun. We should wait until all 10 of us are here. 11, if you count the Nomu, Dabby said. I don't know what that is, but Shigaraki sounded pretty excited about it. Then again, he's a freak, so who knows if that's a good thing. He looked over his shoulder at their ragtag group. Mustard and Muscular were the closest. Himiko gave a small squeal beside him. Now there was someone Dabby could relate to. He admired her bloodlust and conviction. I can't wait. All those new friends. She purred. I hate they have to see me in this junk, but it'll be worth it. Think there'll be cute boys. The final member who joined them so far, Ursa, a large middle-aged man with a mohawk and a tattoo of a bear paw on his chest, huffed. I'm fucking starved, he said. How many did he say I could eat? Dabby laughed. As many as you want, big guy. But remember, the green-haired kid with the freckles is off the menu. The big boss wants him alive. He paused. The one with red and white hair and a scar too. If you kill him, I'll burn you to a crisp. Himiko cocked her head. How come? He looks fun. I bet he'd be so pretty covered in blood. Don't need to give a reason, he said simply. Just know, you touch him, you die. Ursa growled. Telling me what to do. Dabby sighed. He had a bad feeling about that one. Chapter 33, A Test of Courage. Chapter by Roxi2Star. Day 2. Izuku's entire body hurt. Tiger of the Wild Pussycats was unrelenting. Don't even talk to him about the fact his hero name was Tiger, and the Pavlovian response it was having on his stupid teenage body. He wasn't in the mood for it. He was sparring, exercising, and otherwise tearing his muscles to shreds. On top of that, he was blindfolded to train danger sense, having to block random hits from Tiger with shield. Izuku's training was certainly more complex than that of most of his peers. But that tends to happen when you have 6 quirks. His main focus was one for all. It was the base of his fighting style. The stronger it was, the stronger his other quirks could be. All for one was off the table in terms of training. Besides, that wasn't exactly a quirk that needed training. It was straightforward and just sort of happened. Pull, likewise, didn't need training. It was based on his physical strength, so by virtue of training his body for one for all, he was also training it for pull. Blood Curdle was another quirk he wasn't training, though that was for a different reason. He hadn't actually used Blood Curdle since the incident with the Nomu. Plus, not many people even knew he had it in the first place, and he'd rather keep it that way. There wasn't exactly a way to play off a quirk like that compared to his kit. Shield, at least, resembled the green electricity that sparked around his body while using one for all, so he could mask it as an extension of his fake quirk push and pull. And danger sense was just something he could mostly play off to his classmates. Speaking of, pain flared in the back of his head as he did his squats. Reaching a single arm behind himself, he put shield just in time to block a swift punch from Tiger. Good. He yelled, just as pain exploded up his nose. He moved his shield to block his face, not stopping his squats. Instead, a fist collided with the side of his head, just as his brain registered that danger sense had moved. He hissed in pain, colliding with the ground. You'll need faster reflexes than that. Tiger yelled. Come on, get up and back to your exercises. Yes, sir. He yelled, jumping back to his feet and resuming his squats. He heard Tiger move on, probably to help one of the other physical quirks type students with their work. He removed the blindfold, blinking into the light. Izuku had a good spot to watch his classmates work on their quirks as the hot afternoon sun baked them into the dirt. Most everyone was just doing the same specific thing over and over again. It felt awful, but it was probably doing them all a world of favors. Dad had given their teachers pretty detailed reports on how to develop their quirks. He moved on from his classmates as his eyes wandered to his personal favorite site, one that he'd been spying on whenever he had a break from his blindfold. Shadow. Poor Shadow was in his tank top in a basin of water. He had to rapidly switch between ice and fire to keep the water at a neutral temperature. He was panting as he let out blasts of flames and ice back to back over and over again. In the morning, his hair had been pulled back in the tiny ponytail he wore during training. But now it was loose, strands of hair clinging to his face, wet with some mix of sweat and water. His face flushed from exertion, his pink tongue flicking out to lick his lips. Was it hot, or was that just Izuku? Well, either way, it was July. So the heat was getting intense. He kept doing his squats as he stripped off his workout jacket and tossed it aside, leaving himself in just his undershirt. Push-ups. Tiger yelled. Izuku and the other power types from Class B all dropped down into push-up positions. His legs were happy for the break as his arms took over. Izuku glanced over towards Shadow again. Their eyes met. He had paused his training, instead deciding to watch Izuku do his push-ups. He blushed, a small smirk spreading over his face as he did his push-ups faster, just to put on a little show for him. "Todoroki!" Aizawa called, "Why are you stopped?" Ran out of breath, Shoto called back before smacking the side of his basin and resuming his work. "Don't get distracted," their teacher chastised, before moving on to help other people. Their eyes met once more, sharing a small smile before they returned to their training with renewed fervor. Night 2. Finally, the day was over. Aizawa felt like he might die. His stomach was growling, his muscles ached, and his eyes felt heavy. He couldn't wait to crawl back into that hot spring again, then cuddle with Shoto all night. He swooned at the thought as he placed wood into the small outdoor stove in front of him. They were in charge of making their own food. Curry. He wasn't the biggest fan, but he was so hungry he didn't care. "Need help?" Shoto asked as he put the last piece of wood in. "Please," he said. Shoto leaned down next to him, and with a quick flick of his left hand, fire consumed the small logs. "Thanks, Shao-chan," he said as he leaned into him. His boyfriend nodded. "Gonna help the others. Ashido keeps melting her matches," he said and gave him a quick kiss before heading off. Aizawa watched after him with a small smile. Shoto had changed so much in the short time they'd been in each other's lives. He watched as he lit the fire for the girls, all of them cheering around him. Shoto had the smallest ghost of a smile. God, Aizawa was so lucky. How had he landed such a sweet guy? He supposed by force of will and breaking his bones. He'd broken so many bones. Soon, they all had food and ate happily together. Aizawa was pressed up against Shoto's side with Kikin across from him. It wasn't the best food. Honestly, it was pretty terrible, but it was filling. He scarfed down his food. "So, how did your quirk training go, Shinsu-kun?" Aizawa asked between bites. He shrugged. "Fine. Every half hour I had to put someone under and make them do the same tasks. You might get tapped for it tomorrow," he said. "I feel bad pulling people away from their training to help me though." "You know none of us mind, right?" Shoto asked. "I don't mind the sensation of your quirk. It's nice turning my brain off. Kind of like a nap." Aizawa didn't see Shoto get put in to help with Shinsu's training. Must have happened while he had his blindfold on. Cyril looked up from his food. "It feels like a nap?" he asked Shoto, who nodded. "Oh well then sign me up. Shinsu, please, if you can get any control over your target please pick me. My elbows hurt so bad. A 30-minute power nap sounds awesome." Shinsu blinked. "Sure man, I'll try." Kaminari leaned down the table. "Me too. I've never been under your control. I bet it would be a ton of fun." "Stupid quirks," a small voice said. No one really seemed to hear it. Aizawa's eyes flicked to Kota, who was storming off into the forest. Had he eaten? Aizawa looked down at his almost empty plate. He finished it in 2 bites and stood. "I'll be back," he whispered to Shoto, before kissing his cheek. He threw his plate out and grabbed a fresh one, filling it up with the leftover curry from Kikin's pan. He and Sato were the best cooks by far. Once he had a plate, he headed off toward where Kota had vanished. Footsteps followed behind him. He turned to look, and saw that Kikin was stomping after him, hands in his pockets. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Helping Kota," Aizawa said finally. "You don't listen," Kikin said. He glared from the corner of his eye. "If you're not going to help, why are you here?" he asked. "Because I'm not going to be talked out of this. Not until I try." Kikin sighed. "Not here to talk you out of it, dipshit," he said. "I'm here to help. Or at least prevent you from making an ass of yourself." They walked in silence the rest of the way, eventually finding Kota up on the mountainside. It seemed like this was a little hiding spot he'd come to before. A little cliff in front of a cave. A peaceful spot, especially as the sun set and the stars came out. Aizawa held up the plate. "Hey, we thought you might be hungry," he said. "So I made you a plate. It's curry. Kikin here made it, so it's pretty good." "Don't want it," Kota said. "I don't want to talk to you freaks. Get away from my secret base." Aizawa frowned, exchanging a look with Kikin. He only rolled his eyes. "Oi brat, if you don't wanna eat that's fine but don't be fucking rude." He was just trying to be nice. "Shut up," Koda yelled. I can do what I want. I can say what I want. Especially to you assholes. Oh god, who taught this child how to swear? Strengthening your quirks showing off. You guys are the worst. Izuku started softly. Koda, I gotta ask. Were your parents the duo known as Water Hose? Kikin remained stony-faced and impassive. Koda growled, turning to them. Did Mandalay tell you? He asked. Hey? Spit it out. No. Izuku said, waving his arms, I mean. Yes. He said. But that's really all she said. Honestly, We remembered the incident. It was very sad. A tragic waste of human life. Being cut down in the line of duty. It's all so stupid. Koda yelled. You're all idiots calling each other heroes and villains, obsessing over your stupid quirks and showing off. He grabbed his head. It's so pathetic. What kind of career is it that people just go off and die like that? Hey. Kikin shoved his hands in his pockets. A hard one, he said simply. When people choose to become heroes, they take a vow to protect others even at the cost of their own lives. He sighed. Because they signed up to face the danger that lurks around every corner. They were your parents yet, but what would have been worse? Professionals who made the choice to be a hero dying and protecting others, or a civilian who was just in the wrong place at the wrong time dying. Shut up! Koda screamed, they were my parents, anyone else dying would have been better. TCH, Kikin rolled his eyes. Everyone is special to someone. Dipshit. Izuku frowned at Kikin. He wasn't wrong per se, but that was probably the wrong thing to say to a child. He sighed and set the plate down. We'll leave you alone, Izuku said. I'll leave the food here, you really should eat something. Stay safe out here, Koda-kun. He turned. Come on, Kikin. Whatever, Kikin snarled, and the two of them left Koda alone at his secret base. Izuku slipped into the hot spring with a quiet groan. The warmth soothed his aching body, melting away all his stresses of the morning. He walked through the water to the spot on a rock next to Shadow, pausing only to admire his boyfriend, leaned back and stretched out. His back was arched out and his head was back, his long hair hanging behind him and eyes closed in bliss. Izuku smiled and sat next to him. I'm surprised you're enjoying this so much considering you spent your whole day in a tub. Shadow opened his left eye to peer at him. Well, that water wasn't nearly as pleasant as this, he said, and you weren't pressed up against me in the basin, now were you? If you guys are gonna flirt, can you keep it down? Shinsuo asked, trying to wool away this migraine. Izuku chuckled. Sorry. We'll keep it quiet. He turned back to Shadow, leaning closer and dropping his voice. You looked pretty good during training today, he said softly. Kept distracting me. Shadow sat up, leaning close to whisper back. You're the one that did a strip tease. Izuku blushed deeply. I'm not complaining, by the way. Even if it did get me in trouble. He smiled down at him. He looked so handsome. That easygoing smile, the strand of hair that was in his face, and his perfect mismatched eyes. It was enough to take his breath away. I love your eyes, Izuku said softly. The gray one is so soft, and your blue eye is so intense. He covered his left side with a hand. That's his eye. Yours, Izuku reminded him softly, moving the hand away. Besides, it looks way better on you than him. It's such an unusual shade of blue. I've never seen anyone else with anything like it. It's completely a Todoroki color. He smiled softly. Your eyes are nice too, you know. Izuku grinned. Yes, they're green if I remember correctly. It was a running joke, since the first compliment Shadow really ever gave him about his physical appearance was your eyes are green. Shadow shook his head good-naturedly at the jab before replying. They are. A very nice shade too. Soft, cozy. He leaned in further until their foreheads were pressed together. Plus they're big and expressive. Makes you look cuter. Add them with your freckles. Ever finish counting them? No, every time I look at you I find more, Shadow whispered. You're so cute it's killing me. He leaned in to kiss his temple. Still thinking about last night? At the showers. Izuku blushed deeply. Maybe. I can return the favor tonight. Shadow. Izuku said, smacking his chest. Yes please. Kikin growled from his seat not too far from them. "Will you two shut the hell up?" he asked. "I dunno what the fuck you're saying, but it's getting in the way of my peaceful and calm relaxation time. Do you wanna know what happens if I don't relax? You explode." Izuku joked. "I explode? Never change, Kikin," Izuku said, before leaning into Shoto deeper. Day 3. Danger sense lit up on his left side, and he braced shield to tank the attack, feeling a bit satisfied at the sound of a hit being blocked. Again, but this time in front it changed to the right. He tanked that hit as well. "Excellent!" Tiger yelled. Pain in his back. Instead of taking the hit, Izuku turned, grabbing in the air. His fingers wrapped around a firm wrist. "That's much more like it!" Tiger yelled. "Perfect! Keep that up, kid!" He grinned. "Now back to work, kitty. Push UPS." Izuku nodded, pulling his blindfold off. He dropped down to do his push UPS, getting about a rep before Izuku approached. "Midoriya, come on. I need to borrow you," he said. Izuku nodded and hopped up to his feet. "When was the last time you had water?" He blushed. It's been a minute." Honestly, he couldn't remember. Izuku sighed and motioned for him to follow. He grabbed a water bottle from a cooler as they passed. "Drink," he ordered. Izuku did as he was told. He drank half of it in a few gulps. He didn't realize how thirsty he was. "It's your turn to help Shinsu," he said simply. He led him to a small clearing. Shinsu was standing, holding a water bottle to his head. "How are you holding up?" Izuku asked him. "Migraine," Shinsu said through clenched teeth. He was standing in front of a table. On the table were 3 large buttons of red, blue, and green. There was also a dry erase board marker and a marker for it. Finally, there was a deck of cards. Not so bad yet. "I can do one more. Might need a break after." "Yomido." "Hey, Shinsu-kun." He waved. "Take a breather," Izuku ordered. "So, you're good with going under?" Izuku nods quickly. "Sure." Shoto described it as a little nap, and honestly, I could use one. "Glad you see it that way," Shinsu said. "Okay. I'm ready. Mido, come here," he motioned for him. "So, basically you're just gonna stand here. I'll put you under and make you do simple tasks. But for you, it'll be like a little snooze." "I'm very ready for a snooze," he grinned. "Hit me, Shinsu-kun, I'm ready. Take me out." Shinsu chuckled. "Yeah sure, but I think Roki might kill me if I took you out." "Haha, very fun." Izuku's mind went blank. He'd been so wrapped up in the sports festival last time he was under Shinsu's quirk he hadn't stopped to take stock of how it felt. But he was floating. He was still in his body, but it was like he was floating above it. It sort of reminded him of standing in the void of all for one. Perhaps some sort of subspace of the mind? "Pick up the marker." Izuku picked up the marker without telling his body to do that. "Uncap the marker." He pulled the cap off. "Draw a circle on the dry erase board." "Yeah, boom. Perfect circle." Izuku could think of 1,000 applications of a quirk like this if Shinsu could make even his mangled hands do these things. "Draw a square, a perfect square." "Easy." Wait. There were people watching him. The voice kept commanding him, and his body kept responding, but there were people watching him from the tree lines. 8 shadowy figures, all lined up. He could barely make out their silhouettes. Izuku wasn't afraid. He wanted to call out to them. But he couldn't. He was unable to do anything but watch and listen. "Ah, he can hear us again," a voice said. "Makes sense," the woman's voice said. "That quirk seems to put him deep in his own mind. That's where we reside after all." He wasn't sure how he knew, but she was smiling. "Hello, Izuku. It's a pleasure to meet you." "I don't think the kid can talk back," a gruff voice said. "Shame," another said. "Is it? I don't care to hear what he has to say. You should give him a chance." That voice felt the most familiar. The most soothing. Sort of reminded him of his dad. "He's got a good heart. He's reckless. He can have both. Besides, he's my nephew." Izuku's eyes widened. The vestiges. The previous users of One for All. One of them was his uncle. Uncle Yoichi. He wished he could speak. Wished he could reach out somehow. His dad didn't talk much about his younger brother. Everything he said was either with a soft fondness or a deep sadness. He wanted to know his uncle. Wanted his uncle to know him. They were family. Even if he was just an echo inside his quirk, he wanted to know him. Wanted to be a go-between for him and his dad. "Izuku, sweetie, you're doing so well," the woman said. "I think you are going to be leaving us soon, so please take care of Toshinori for me. And tell your father I miss him too," Uncle Yoichi said softly. The quirk was lifted. Izuku blinked several times, wobbling on his feet. He looked down. The dry erase board was covered in shapes, the deck of cards was opened and a small card tower stood on the table. "Whoa," Izuku said softly. "Nice work, Shinsu," Izuwa said. "Take a few minutes." "How are you, Midoriya?" Izuku turned to face him. Weird," he said. He flexed his fingers a few times. "Good otherwise though?" He nodded. "Good. Are you alright to get back to training?" Yeah, I can." Night 3. Izuku spent the rest of the day in his own head. He had seen the vestiges. He decided he would call his dad and All Might after dinner to talk to them about it. Their words replayed in his head, even through dinner. Xiaodo noticed but didn't push. Izuku was grateful for it. Xiaodo was so wonderful. After dinner, before Izuku could go find his phone, the wild pussycats had a little surprise for them. A test of courage. Ragdoll said happily. "We'll pit the classes against each other." She explained the rules. It was simple enough. Class B would be the scarers first. They'd hide all around the loop in the forest, and Class A, going in pairs, would walk around the circle and grab a piece of paper from a table in the center and return with it. Ragdoll would be there waiting for them. Though Izuku did some quick math, with their class having 5 people in the lessons, that left an odd man out. Of course, it was him. He looked down at his lone number 8 with a sigh. Xiaodo had a large number 2 on the paper he'd drawn. Kiken had the other. He glared at it, then turned to Izuku. "Oi, Deku," he yelled, grabbing the paper from his hand. "We're switching," he snarled. "I'd rather go by myself than with fucking icy hot here." "Ah," Izuku smiled. "Thank you, Kiken. This isn't for you. I'm doing this selfishly." "Thank you, Bakugu," Xiaodo deadpanned. Izuku took his hand and beamed up at him. "It's kind of a romantic thing, hey?" he asked. "If I get scared, will you let me hide my face in your chest?" he teased. Xiaodo nodded and held his hand to his chest very seriously. "Of course, bunny. I promise I will keep you safe and not let anyone touch you or scare you." Kiken rolled his eyes. "You know what? Fuck you both. I hope they scare you so badly you piss your pants and then die," he said. The first group to go in was Xiaoji and Tokoyami. That meant Xiaodo and Izuku were next, followed by Okako and Tsuyu, Aoyama and Yaeorozu, and then after them, a very awkward-looking Shinsu and Ojiro. Things between them never really got any better since Shinsu used Ojiro at the sports festival, and Ojiro, in turn, dropped out. It wasn't that they hated each other, but Ojiro never reached out, and Shinsu was always a bit too nervous too. He was pretty sensitive about people hating him over his quirk. Maybe that's something he should help with. "Izuku, come on, it's our turn," Xiaodo said, drawing him from his thoughts. "Ah. Okay," he said, holding on to Xiaodo tightly. "We're off," he said and waved to the rest of the class. Together, they stepped into the trail. "Kind of spooky," Xiaodo said softly. The darkness in the trees made walking through it feel like they were being watched. A shiver ran up Izuku's spine as they walked down the path together. "What were the quirks of the Class B kids?" he asked. "I honestly didn't pay any attention to them." Izuku smacked his forehead with his palm. "Xiaodo, they can probably hear you," he scolded. "It's not nice, they're just as strong as we are. Probably stronger, some of their quirks are really impressive. It's not that I don't think they're stronger. I just don't really pay attention to stuff if it isn't right in front of me." He squeezed Izuku's hand. "Not observant like you. So, who should we be on the lookout for?" "Well, I haven't seen many of their quirks in action, but for something like this, I think we should be wary of Kuroryo since he can phase into anything that's black or dark in color. So, he could be in any shadow we see, Izuku explained. Yanagi is another one, since she can move objects around she could have big sticks or rocks floating around us. I'm sure other people will have cool ways to use their quirks since this challenge is all about creativity. Shadow hummed and opened his mouth to speak, but before he could say anything, a low growl came from a nearby bush. It sounded like an animal about to pounce. Izuku's danger sense didn't go off, though. So, obviously, it was someone from Class B. Shadow, noticing Izuku's lack of reaction, decided everything was fine as well. The bush roared as Shizhida burst from it in his full beast form. Neither Shadow nor Izuku jumped. Instead, "Oh! Shishida-kun!" Izuku cried, his eyes wide. "Using your beast form is such a great idea!" he cried. "How strong does it make you? My dad says it also affects your thinking and tends to make you more rash, but I wonder if there's a way to help your beast side improve thinking-wise? Maybe if you did logical puzzles while in this form." Shizhida shrank back down, staring blankly at them. "Not even a flinch, hey?" he asked. "Well, I knew you were there," Izuku said simply. "All right. I'll take note of that. Thanks, Midoriya. By the way, yes. Midoriya-san actually does have me doing crossword puzzles during quirk training. It blows." Izuku chuckled. "Well, good luck with the next ones. It's Eureka and Azui, so you should be able to at least scare Okako," he smiled. "But don't tell her I told you that." Shizhida only grinned, slinking back into his bush. Shadow looked down at him. "Are you going to advise all of them on how to scare Eureka?" he asked. "I just want everyone to do a good job. Besides, it helps me think of ideas for when it's our turn to scare them." Izuku crooned, leading Shadow deeper. "This isn't so scary. I'm having fun." "Yeah," Shadow said. As they walked together, something appeared on the ground at their feet. A head of black hair seemingly popped into existence right in front of them. "Oh," Shadow said in quiet surprise. A small shudder ran through his body. Izuku didn't even flinch. The head rolled back, revealing the face of Kode. "Boo." Izuku dropped down to all fours to get a closer look. "Whoa. How are you doing that? Your quirk is changing the size of things, right? Did you make yourself smaller, then just make your head bigger so it's like you came out of nowhere?" he asked. "That's so cool." Kode blinked at him a few times, taken aback. "You're a lot like your dad," she said coolly, before increasing the rest of her body to normal size. She placed her hands behind her back, gave them a nod, and walked back into the trees. "She got me," Shadow said softly. "I'm impressed, that was rather good." He looked down at Izuku as they kept walking. "You're really not fazed by any of this, are you?" he asked. "Not really," he said. He leaned in close. "I told you about danger sense before, the quirk that manifested on its own." Shadow nodded. Izuku sighed in relief. Sometimes it was hard to keep track of who he told about what. Though he did make it a habit to be as honest with Shadow as humanly possible. "Right, so I know when I have something to fear. If danger sense doesn't activate, then why worry? It hasn't failed me yet. Though it can be a bit slow. But I think my blind training earlier might be helping. It seemed to be getting faster at telling me when a threat was coming." Shadow nodded. "Maybe we should make that part of your regular training?" he asked. "I was thinking that too," he said happily. The path curved. They must be in a decent way now. Izuku swung their hands gently, eyes flicking around to see the next jump pane. He stopped. Danger sense was going off. At least he was pretty sure it was danger sense. It wasn't the normal stabbing pain, but a gentle throb that pulsed through his entire head. "Izuku?" Shadow asked. Izuku leaned over himself. This wasn't right. What was happening? "Izuku, what's wrong?" "Danger," he said softly. As he said that, the smell of smoke filled his lungs. They both looked up and could see the distant signs of a fire. Faint screams could be heard behind them. "This isn't good," he said softly. "Everyone." Mandalay's telepathy shot through his head. "We're under attack by 2 villains. It's highly possible there are more out there. Everyone who can, should get back to camp. If you encounter a villain, do not engage. Retreat." Shadow pulled Izuku up correctly. He grabbed his arms, holding him tightly. Izuku, can you walk? He asked him. Why yes, he said. The pain was still there, but dull. I'm okay. Just took me by surprise. Shadow, I'm fine. He offered a small smile, grabbing Shadow's wrists. Let's get to Ragdoll. She'll know what to do. They both turned and started making their way forward with more haste in their step, before stopping dead in their tracks. A person stood in the path, blocking their way forward. He was tall with broad shoulders that seemed to block the sight around him. He wasn't wearing much, just sporting some fur around his waist. He turned to face them. He had a large tattoo of a bear paw on his chest and a mohawk. A villain. Izuku's danger sense was going off. Oh, just my luck, he snarled at them. I found the only person on the do not kill list, and the kid that ugly freak told me not to kill. His mouth turned up into a large smirk. But fuck Dabby. He's not in charge of me. Hey, green hair, stand down, I'll get in trouble if I eat you. Rather avoid pissing off the Shadow Man. His eyes locked onto Shadow. But if Dabby thinks he can order me around TCH. Peppermint here is gonna taste real nice. Think I'll save your head and throw it at that bastard. Panic took over his body. Eat Shadow? Kill him? Seemed he had a personal vendetta. The man gave a roar, his body twisting in front of their eyes. Where the man once stood now was a massive black bear almost 15 feet high with massive paws and razor-sharp claws. Oh, that's what he meant. The mental image of Shadow being torn in half by huge and sharp teeth filled his mind. One for all erupted around his whole body, as a new emotion settled in his core. Pure, unadulterated rage. Alright, that's where we'll leave off for the day. Thanks so much for listening along with me today. If you enjoyed, please like and comment down below and check out the video or playlist on the screen for more content from me. I look forward to seeing you next time. Ciao for now, lovelies.